You won't believe what Jasmine Crockett said to Megyn Kelly. The entire room went silent. It started as a normal debate, but what Jasmine did next changed everything. Stay tuned, this one's going viral for a reason. Nobody expected Jasmine Crockett to go that hard. It was supposed to be a standard debate, intense, yes, but nothing out of the ordinary. The kind of political clash where both sides exchange sharp words and move on. But what happened between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and former Fox News host Megyn Kelly left the room frozen. The audience wasn't just shocked, they were hooked. It all started on a live-streamed panel discussion titled Race, Law, and Media Bias in Modern America. The format was familiar, a few political figures, a media voice, and a moderator, all sitting around a table under hot lights and cameras. But what happened once the conversation began was anything but routine. Megyn Kelly came in with her usual confidence, poised and polished, ready to challenge the panel with her signature smirk and sharp-tongued commentary. Her goal was clear from the start: control the conversation, shift the focus, and push Crockett into a defensive corner. She's done it before, many times. But this time, she met a force she couldn't bend: Jasmine Crockett. Crockett didn't just hold her own, she flipped the entire conversation. And she did it without raising her voice or playing into the aggressive caricature so often projected onto outspoken black women. Within minutes, it was clear she wasn't there to play nice or water down her beliefs to be more palatable for the mainstream. She was there to say what needed to be said, in the clearest, boldest terms possible. What triggered the moment was a question Megyn delivered with surgical precision. She turned to Crockett and asked, "Don't you think constantly bringing up race in political debates does more harm than good? Doesn't it divide more than it unites?" It was the kind of loaded question Megyn has made a career on, designed to put the opponent on the back foot, force a reaction, and make them look too emotional or extreme. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. She leaned forward, calm and collected, looked Megyn directly in the eyes, and delivered a line that would be replayed on social media for days. "You see, Megyn," she said, "when people like you say, 'Stop bringing race into it,' what you're really saying is, 'Don't make me uncomfortable with the truth.'" The studio was dead silent. Even the moderator didn't know what to say. Crockett didn't stop there. She followed up with a breakdown of what it means to live in a country where racial inequality isn't just a theory, it's a lived, daily reality for millions. She explained how discussions about policy can't be separated from the historical and systemic forces that shape who benefits and who doesn't. And most importantly, she made it clear that being uncomfortable with these conversations doesn't mean they shouldn't happen, it means they're working. The way she spoke wasn't just powerful, it was surgical. She dismantled Megyn's question point by point, replacing vague assumptions with hard truths and real lived experiences. Her tone was confident but never cruel. Her words were bold, but always backed by logic, history, and first-hand understanding. Megyn tried to respond, that was expected. She launched into a familiar defense, pointing to her background in journalism, her interviews with people across the political spectrum, and her belief in colorblind reporting. But by then, the momentum was already gone. Crockett had turned the tables, and now it was Megyn who looked flustered, struggling to shift the narrative back in her direction. As the exchange went on, the audience's reactions told the full story. You could see heads nodding, people leaning forward, hanging on Jasmine's every word. Even those who came in with no strong opinions were visibly moved by her presence. This wasn't just a political figure making a point, this was a woman speaking from a place of truth, clarity, and undeniable strength. And the internet noticed. Within minutes, clips of the exchange hit TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Some creators reposted Jasmine's quote with captions like "Say that again" and "This is how you handle gaslighting." Others stitched the moment into commentary videos, breaking down why her response hit so hard and why it resonated with so many people across racial and political lines. By the end of the day, the phrase Jasmine Crockett was trending. And not just in political circles. She was being quoted by pop culture influencers, college professors, and even fellow members of Congress. The ripple effect of that moment extended far beyond the original debate. It became a cultural moment, a viral clip that packed more truth in 30 seconds than most political panels manage in an hour. What made it even more powerful was that Jasmine didn't gloat, brag, or declare herself the winner. She didn't need to. Her message stood on its own. And in a world filled with noise, sensationalism, and surface-level takes, that kind of clarity hit harder than any viral soundbite. Nobody expected Jasmine Crockett to go that hard, not Megyn Kelly, not the audience, not even some of her supporters. But she did. And in doing so, she didn't just win a debate. She reminded the world what happens when someone speaks up with purpose, knowledge, and unapologetic truth. Megyn Kelly wasted no time. From the moment the cameras rolled, she was in full control mode, polished, poised, and ready to dominate the conversation. Dressed in her usual sharp style and wearing that signature smirk that longtime viewers know all too well, she leaned in toward Jasmine Crockett with a question that was anything but innocent. "Congresswoman," she said, locking eyes with Crockett, "don't you think that when you constantly bring race into political conversations, it distracts from the real issues?" At first glance, the question sounded measured, maybe even fair, but anyone who's followed Megyn Kelly's media career could hear the undertones. It wasn't just a question. It was a carefully crafted attack, one that positioned Jasmine as overly focused on race, as if caring about systemic inequality was a flaw rather than a responsibility. It was classic Megyn: use a calm tone to deliver a loaded premise, bait the guest into overreacting, then retreat into plausible deniability when called out. She's made a career out of this strategy. But what she didn't expect was what happened next. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. Didn't pause. Didn't fall for the trap. Instead, she straightened in her seat, gave Megyn a measured look, and replied with the kind of calm precision that cuts deeper than any shouted comeback. "You see, Megyn," Jasmine began, "when people like you say, 'Stop bringing race into it,' what you're really saying is, 'Don't make me uncomfortable with the truth.'" For a second, everything stopped. The crowd, mostly quiet until now, stirred slightly. The moderator shifted in his seat. Megyn's face twitched, just slightly, like she'd been caught off guard by the directness of the reply. But Crockett wasn't finished. She leaned in, voice steady and firm, and continued. "We can't have real conversations about law, media, or politics in America without acknowledging race. Because race is built into the foundation of this country's systems. Ignoring it doesn't make the issue go away, it just makes it easier for those benefiting from the imbalance to pretend everything's fine." The moment was electric. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. She didn't mock. She didn't need to. Megyn opened her mouth to respond, but for the first time in the exchange, it looked like she was searching for the right words, and not finding them. Her signature confidence wavered. She tried to pivot by tossing out statistics about economic growth, education access, and rising crime in urban areas, hoping to shift the debate away from race and toward what she framed as universal issues. But Crockett saw it coming. She cut in smoothly, saying, "Let's not confuse the symptoms with the cause. You can throw out numbers all day, but if you're not willing to talk about the systems that create those numbers, then what are we really doing here? This isn't about distraction. It's about reality." This wasn't a rant, it was a well-articulated argument backed by both data and lived experience. Jasmine Crockett didn't just disagree with Megyn Kelly, she dismantled the entire premise of her question, brick by brick. She exposed the false neutrality often used in political media to silence or soften the topic of race. And in doing so, she didn't just defend herself, she put Megyn on the defensive. The audience could feel it. You could see them react, some with subtle nods, others with stunned expressions. Even viewers at home watching the live stream began reacting instantly on social media. Comments like "she's cooking," and "that's how you handle loaded questions," started flooding in. Clips from the moment were screen-recorded and reposted within minutes on TikTok, X, and YouTube Shorts. It was already clear, this wasn't just a soundbite, it was a statement. Megyn, trying to regain control, changed tack again. "So are you saying the media is racist?" she asked, in a tone that implied the question was absurd. Crockett didn't hesitate. "I'm saying parts of the media reflect the biases of the people who control it," she replied. "And I'm saying that if we don't challenge those narratives, they continue to shape public opinion in dangerous ways." Boom. No yelling. No insults. Just facts, delivered in a voice that made even those who didn't agree want to listen. At this point, Megyn was visibly frustrated. She had underestimated Jasmine Crockett, and it showed. The calm control she entered with was slipping, replaced with a sharpness in her tone and quicker interruptions, as if trying to regain a footing that had already vanished. But the damage was done. Jasmine wasn't just responding, she was controlling the entire tempo of the debate. And what made it more impactful was that Jasmine wasn't just speaking for herself, she was giving voice to millions of Americans who have long felt misrepresented, talked over, or completely erased in mainstream political conversations. She didn't say anything outrageous. She didn't call Megyn names. She didn't have to. She just spoke the truth, clearly, boldly, and unapologetically. And that's what made it hit so hard. Megyn Kelly may have walked into that panel thinking she had the upper hand. With years of media experience and a reputation for dominating televised debates, she was used to being the loudest, sharpest voice in the room. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't interested in playing by Megyn's rules. She wasn't there to win a TV moment, she was there to change the conversation. And that's exactly what she did. After delivering her powerful takedown of Megyn's race-baiting question, Jasmine didn't just wait for the next attack. She leaned in and took control of the entire discussion, flipping the script and shifting the energy of the room with laser focus. It wasn't just about responding, it was about redefining the frame of the debate itself. Megyn tried to shift gears, throwing out generalized stats and buzzwords about law and order, economic opportunity, and personal responsibility. She aimed to corner Jasmine into one of those pre-written talking points, the kind of political traps designed to make progressive speakers look like they're avoiding real issues. But Crockett wasn't playing defense. She turned the conversation around with masterful clarity. "Let's stop pretending that everyone starts on the same playing field," she said. "You can't talk about personal responsibility without also talking about systemic responsibility. That's like blaming someone for running slower in a race while ignoring the fact they started 10 yards behind." Her analogy hit hard. The panel went quiet again. For a moment, it felt like Crockett was not just debating, she was teaching. And people were learning. She continued by addressing how the media portrays black politicians and public figures, especially women, in an entirely different light than their white counterparts. "When I speak passionately, I get labeled angry. When a white male senator yells, he's called passionate, tough, or bold. Why is that? Why is there always a different standard when it comes to how black women are allowed to express ourselves?" Megyn tried to jump in, but this time, the moderator stepped in and let Jasmine continue. The audience was clearly responding to her message, and interrupting now would have only made things worse for Megyn. Crockett's words had struck a nerve, and it wasn't just about race or politics. It was about truth. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't grandstanding. She was simply calling out double standards that have existed for decades, and doing it with the kind of composure that made even her critics stop and think. "You can't have an honest debate about media fairness while ignoring how much of the media is built on stereotypes," she said. "When you decide what stories to run, what photos to use, who gets the mic and who gets silenced, that's not just reporting. That's shaping public perception." At this point, the dynamic had completely shifted. Megyn Kelly, usually quick to jab and pivot, found herself repeating phrases she's used in the past. She tried to claim she was just asking tough questions and trying to keep things objective. But Jasmine had already dismantled that shield. "You say objective," Crockett responded, "but whose version of objectivity are we following? The kind that ignores lived experiences? The kind that says neutrality means pretending race has nothing to do with law enforcement or poverty or political access?" That was the moment. The crowd, a mix of political insiders, students, activists, and media professionals, reacted not with applause, but with that kind of audible you hear when someone says something that cuts to the bone. It wasn't performative. It was real. And online? It was blowing up. Viewers watching the stream started clipping her responses and posting them with titles like, "Jasmine Crockett just ended Megyn Kelly with facts. This is what holding media accountable looks like." Finally, someone said it plainly. Even some people who previously didn't know who Jasmine Crockett was were suddenly sharing her words, quoting her lines, and saying, "This is the kind of leadership we need more of." Megyn, by contrast, looked less like a seasoned media expert and more like someone realizing they'd lost control of the narrative. She wasn't just being outdebated, she was being outclassed. And it wasn't just what Jasmine said, it was how she said it. She remained composed, thoughtful, direct, and unwavering. Her confidence didn't come from ego, it came from experience. From knowing the systems she was criticizing. From having lived through the things Megyn was treating like theoretical debate topics. That authenticity made everything she said carry weight. By the end of that segment, Jasmine Crockett had gone from being just another name on a panel to becoming the only voice that people remembered. She had taken the conversation and flipped it entirely, forcing not just Megyn, but the entire room, to sit with the truth, whether they liked it or not. And that's what made it such a powerful moment. In a world full of talking heads, canned answers, and rehearsed outrage, Jasmine Crockett brought something different, genuine conviction. She wasn't there to play to the camera. She was there to speak for those who rarely get a seat at the table. And in doing so, she didn't just shift the conversation, she owned it. What happened on that panel didn't just stay in the studio. The moment Jasmine Crockett finished delivering her bold, clear, and deeply personal truths, the impact could be felt far beyond the room. The live audience, which had started the event with polite interest and moderate engagement, was now fully alert, eyes wide, leaning in, some even whispering to their neighbors, "Did she really just say that?" The silence that followed some of Jasmine's most powerful lines wasn't awkward, it was electric. It was the kind of silence that only comes when people are absorbing something real, something they didn't expect to hear so plainly on a televised political panel. Then came the applause. At first scattered, but then growing, and not the kind of forced clapping that panels sometimes get when a host wraps up their point. This was genuine, raw, and filled with appreciation. Even a few members of the audience who had been nodding along with Megyn earlier were now visibly impressed. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just responded to a challenge, she had turned the entire event into a spotlight on truth, bias, and double standards in politics and media. But the real explosion happened online. The live chat under the streaming feed lit up instantly. Viewers started reacting in real time, some typing out Crockett's exact quotes in all caps, others spamming emojis, and many just sitting there stunned, typing, "Wow." Then came the viral moment. Within 10 minutes, someone clipped Jasmine's "privilege is ignoring the truth" quote and posted it on TikTok. Within an hour, the clip had over 500,000 views, hundreds of comments, and people stitching it into their own videos with captions like, "This is the energy we need in 2025" and "Jasmine Crockett for president." On X, formerly Twitter, hashtags began trending. Hashtag Jasmine Crockett. Hashtag Megyn Kelly. Hashtag mic drop moment. Hashtag Black Women Lead. And it wasn't just political junkies chiming in. Celebrities, activists, and even late-night hosts reposted clips or quoted her words. People who didn't follow politics suddenly knew Jasmine Crockett's name, and they weren't forgetting it anytime soon. One tweet read, "Megyn Kelly came with her usual smugness. Jasmine Crockett came with the truth. And the truth won." Another. This wasn't just a debate. This was a masterclass. Crockett didn't raise her voice once, and somehow, she shook the room. Even more surprising was how many people outside her usual base of support showed respect. Some conservative-leaning commentators, the kind who typically criticize progressive voices, admitted that Jasmine made some fair points and handled herself like a pro. Others simply said what many were thinking. You don't have to agree with her to admit, she owned that conversation. YouTube was no different. Within hours, multiple channels had uploaded full-length reactions, breakdowns, and analysis videos. Some creators paused the video mid-debate just to emphasize the power behind her delivery. Others compared her approach to famous moments in political history, likening her confidence and poise to figures like AOC or even Shirley Chisholm. The comments under those videos told a powerful story. People were grateful. They were hungry for someone who didn't tiptoe around uncomfortable topics, who didn't soften their message to avoid offending privileged ears. Here are just a few real examples pulled from YouTube comments that mirror the vibe. Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak. She educated. I felt that in my soul. It's about time someone said it without filters. Megyn thought she was walking into a debate. She walked into a storm and didn't even realize it. It wasn't just about the clash between two women, it was about what that clash represented. On one side, a former mainstream media figure known for conservative leanings and pointed rhetoric. On the other, a rising black congresswoman who has built her career on defending the voiceless and calling out injustice where others play safe. And the crowd, both in person and online, saw exactly what happened: a shift. A shift in power. A shift in tone. A shift in what political truth-telling can look like when it's done without fear. It was also empowering for those who often feel left out of political discourse. Young people of color, especially young black women, flooded social media with messages of pride and support. For many of them, this wasn't just a politician doing her job, it was personal. Jasmine Crockett stood there, unshaken, speaking their reality, challenging the comfortable lies, and doing it all with grace. Activists and advocacy groups began resharing the moment as a teaching tool, an example of how to speak truth to power without apologizing for it. College professors even started referencing the clip in lectures, using it to spark classroom conversations about media framing, race, and political identity. What was supposed to be just another televised panel discussion had become a cultural turning point. And through it all, Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't pat herself on the back. She simply posted a short message the next morning that read, "It's not about being loud. It's about being heard." That one line, much like everything else she said that day, spoke volumes. In the days that followed the debate, the internet didn't just keep talking, it exploded. Jasmine Crockett's name trended for nearly 72 hours straight across multiple platforms. Clips from the debate weren't just circulating, they were dominating. Commentators from all corners of the political spectrum began weighing in. News outlets published reaction pieces. And social media kept churning out millions of impressions on every clip where Jasmine Crockett had delivered her firebrand lines. But Jasmine wasn't soaking in the attention. She was using the moment. Instead of letting it be a one-time viral flash, she went straight to her platforms and continued the conversation. She posted follow-up videos. She thanked people for the support. But most importantly, she clarified that this wasn't about personal ego or winning a debate, this was about accountability, truth, and representation. She tweeted, "If people are uncomfortable, that means we're finally having the right conversation." That message hit just as hard as anything she said on stage. It was clear, she hadn't just dominated a debate, she had started a movement. Her supporters weren't just cheering. They were organizing. Influential progressives, civil rights groups, and even voting rights organizations began using the debate clip in new campaigns. One viral ad by a grassroots activist group featured Jasmine's now iconic quote, "Privilege is being able to ignore the truth," over powerful images of real Americans dealing with injustice. High school debate coaches began assigning the video as required viewing. College students hosted discussion panels about the media's role in silencing voices like Crockett's. It wasn't just political anymore. It had become cultural. Meanwhile, Megyn Kelly, who had made a career of being front and center, was noticeably silent. For nearly 2 full days, she said nothing. No tweet. No comment. No podcast. Her audience waited, hoping she'd address what many were calling her most public humbling moment yet. When she finally did respond on her show, her tone was subdued. She dismissed the incident as a spirited exchange of ideas and avoided mentioning Jasmine's name entirely, a move many online saw as an attempt to reclaim control of the narrative without admitting defeat. But it was too late. The narrative had already been rewritten. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman anymore. She was a symbol, a force, representing a generation tired of sugarcoating the truth. Her calm, confident dismantling of Megyn's argument had struck a chord because it went beyond politics. It was about who gets to speak, who gets listened to, and who gets dismissed before they even open their mouth. Jasmine Crockett represented those who've been told to tone it down to be taken seriously. Those who've been called too emotional, too loud, or too radical for simply speaking their truth. And now, those same people had someone on that stage, in front of the cameras, saying the very things they've held inside for years. But Jasmine didn't stop there. She used the attention to elevate bigger issues: voting rights, media bias, racial profiling, and the weaponization of narratives against marginalized communities. Her interviews in the days following weren't victory laps, they were policy-focused, centered on using the moment to push for long-term change. She made it clear that while viral moments are powerful, they mean nothing if we don't use them to drive real conversations, pass real legislation, and hold real systems accountable. And people listened. Her follower count skyrocketed. Donations to her campaign surged. Even her opponents had to admit that, politically, she had just leveled up. But it wasn't just her politics that elevated, it was her presence. Her authenticity. Her ability to hold her ground without yelling, to remain calm while being provoked, to stay intelligent and emotionally resonant at the same time. She had mastered something few politicians can: the ability to go viral and stay credible. And through it all, she never stopped being unapologetically herself. No filter. No performance. Just truth. Jasmine Crockett didn't just end a debate that day. She cracked something wide open. She reminded America that the people we often ignore or sideline have the sharpest voices, the deepest insight, and the most urgent truths. And she reminded people watching, especially young Black women, that they don't have to shrink to fit someone else's mold. They don't have to soften their voices to be heard. Because sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is speak. Clearly. Calmly. Unapologetically. And in front of the whole world. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win that debate, she lit a fire. Now it's your turn. Do you think she went too far, or was this the truth people needed to hear? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more unfiltered moments and bold political breakdowns like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. This is State Talk, where we say what others won't.